Good morning and welcome to the session about SLES for SAP. My name is Christian Holzing. I'm the Senior Product Manager for SLES for SAP. And I just give you a brief overview this morning about what we're doing, what the latest features are. And by the way, Russ is the guy who's doing all the cool videos that you've seen. So if you want to get some input on that. And there's also a YouTube channel. We're going to roll them here, but there's plenty of comedy music videos that we're doing on YouTube. So just as a side note, go and check that out. Okay, so this is not working as it should be. No, it does. Okay, so where are we? SLES for SAP is by far the most used Linux distribution under SAP Hana. So about 90% of all installations of Hana run on top of SLES for SAP. In general, we have 12,000 joint customers with SAP. There are plenty of references out there. So if you're not sure if you want to go with us, go and check out the websites. Tons of references of customers that successfully implemented SAP solutions on top of SUSE Linux Enterprise Server. We support all different workloads of SAP, and we've been the founding members. You might have heard about the Linux Lab in Waldorf, Germany. That's actually where I'm based most of the time. So I came all the way from Germany to present to you. And SUSE is a founding member right from the start of the Linux Lab, and we have a very good presence. A couple of my colleagues are here, so if you really want to have deep technical discussions, go and find our people at the booth and go ask them questions about what we can do. So I just wanted to start here, as we're not in a deep technical conference here, with a mission statement. Right? So where are we? What are we doing? How do I personally think as the product manager about SLES for SAP as a distribution? So SLES and SLES for SAP provide a multi-model operating system that gives your admin peace of mind through stability, reliability, and support of new technologies by making open source software enterprise ready, especially for SAP workloads. Right? So what does that mean? Starting on top, the multi-model operating system. Obviously, we provide Linux, which is an operating system. Multi-model is something we introduced with SLES 15, meaning we support all the different deployment models, and we support two different speeds of an operating system. Right? So you have the traditional operating system with Linux or Windows or whatever your flavor is. That is usually slow moving, and you see on the other hand side a lot of movement in the container world right now, right? And that's fast speed, it's DevOps, it's deployments within minutes rather than weeks or months. So we're trying to bring this into one product, and we actually do. We're not trying, we do this actually right now, and we're able to support the two speeds here. That's what we mean with multi-model operating system. And I think the key value that we can bring to the table and that differentiates us is stability and reliability of the operating systems. So I was talking to Gartner a couple of weeks ago at our conference, and I basically said the biggest value that we can bring to the table to a data center, to an admin, is that they are not getting a call in the middle of the night, being woken up. The systems just run, they are stable, HA performs, and your business operation actually continues, you don't have outages. That's, I think, the biggest value we can bring to the table. And if that happens, we're doing our job right. And there's also the support of new technologies. I'm going to cover Intel Optane briefly during the session. But there's a lot of movements happening. There's a lot of new innovation that's coming and that we want to support. And that's something what we are really good at, in providing stability and reliability, and at the same time embracing new technologies like containers, like Optanes, and again, just helping you to smoothly get that on board. And the last point is open source software that becomes enterprise ready. Linux is open source. Everything we do, everything we develop, we give back to the community before it gets into our distribution. right? So we live and breathe open source. We're the open source company from our genes. But open source needs to become enterprise ready, which means you guys are running enterprise workloads on it, right? And you need support for that, you need reliability, you need integration testing amongst the components, and that's what we really do. That's what our distribution is, that's what SLES for SAP does. We provide you the services around it, make sure that everything you get is tested, is reliable, and you can put your business processes on top of. So there are a couple of recent news with 15 minutes to talk about this, just a glimpse on it, but I will be around here, so if you want to have deeper discussions, my colleague and myself will be able to help you with that. So what we're doing at the moment is SLES for SAP has a set of SAP-related tooling, starting with installation wizards. There are performance tuning tools part of the package, which just implements a set of SAP nodes right away, completely automated. So that is just completely in a rework phase. Subtune is one of the tools that's just in a beta state right now. We're working with hardware partners right now to provide that and to have it tested. Subconf is already there. Then there is a feature that is part of the recent distribution, which is workload memory protection. That means if you think of Hana as in a memory database, you don't want the system to start writing pieces from the memory back to disk, called swapping. You don't want that to happen, because that means you're actually taking parts of your HANA database, write it back to disk, because you're just running a backup. And there's technology that we have as part of the solution that protects your HANA data to remain in memory. And there is a lot of innovation going on at the moment in automated deployments. So there is an installation wizard part of the product where you can just automatically install your SAP workloads, may it be NetWeaver or HANA, just an automated install. There is also a wizard for automated cluster setup and upgrades for HANA. So you don't have to do it manually. There's a wizard for it. You just run it, a script, and it's done with the UI on top of it. And also in terms of cloud providers and cloud deployments, there's also a lot of work going on right now, and that's an open source project at the moment, where we have automated deployment. For example, if you're a Microsoft Azure customer, you could basically at some point go in and just say, I want to deploy an Azure instance and deploy HANA on it, or deploy a HANA cluster fully automated. So that's coming, that's all happening. There is a lot of innovation making that simpler happening and on its way. One very big change we made that I just want to point out here is that since December last year, every service pack that we provide for SLES for SAP Solutions 12 and SLES for SAP Solutions 15 sees a support of 4.5 years on a general subscription. That was different before. We were supporting the release for 1.5 years, before 2.5 years under a standard subscription, and then you had the option to purchase LTSS, which was long-term support and an additional charge. That's been gone. So by now, with a standard subscription, with a standard commitment with SUSE for multiple years, you can just go and run your whatever SLES 12 SP2 for 4.5 years and then skip to SP3 or SP4. So it makes things a lot easier, and it's fully supported within this term, within this 4.5 years without additional charges. That doesn't affect SLES 11. So if you might be an IBM customer on Power, SLES 11 for big endian deployments is the only certified option you have. So this goes basically out of general support already. So SLES 11 SP4 went out of general support in April. There's still, and it's the last service pack of SLES 11. So if you want to continue running it, there is still the option of LTSS. So we haven't removed that. You get still support, but for all the others, except for the last service pack, there is no LTSS option anymore. It's 4.5 years. The last service pack of a given code stream, SLES 12, for example, you get an option to buy LTSS and have an additional couple of years of support. The reason we're doing it is really to align better with hardware replacement. So you set a system up on bare metal, you run it for 3-4 years. You can stay on one given release. You do not need to do upgrades and just keep going. And when you replace the hardware, reinstall your HANA instance, you can just move to the next service pack. So hopefully that simplifies things quite a bit. So from an HA perspective, just briefly want to touch on this. There is an HA booth over there. SUSE has basically invented a lot of the HA features on the operating systems together with SAP. From a HANA perspective, and the same to a large extent applies obviously to NetWeaver as well, but HANA is somewhat different, special here. We've started in the regular setup with one active, one passive node, and an automated failover over this. There's an interesting anecdote. I forgot to mention that in the beginning. HANA is actually built and compiled on top of SLES for SAP. Right? So SAP develops on SLES, and they are also running their internal hack systems on top of SLES. It was kind of interesting. We had a couple of debates on HA, and SAP was thinking like, no, we better do this manually. So at some point we were just capturing what the resource agents would do and how the HA functionality would perform a failover, just for the operation guys at SAP looking at it and saying, yeah, that's precisely what we're doing as well. So it has a nice blessing from SAP. So from the HA scenarios, just a simple 2-node cluster scenario. Then there's a cost-optimized scenario that we can support, where you basically have on the secondary node the QA database in it, which gets a certain amount of memory assigned to it. And obviously on a failover, you have to shut down the QA instance and do a little bit of work. But from a cost-effective QA testing perspective, that makes good sense. Then there is the whole asynchronous sync for a third node, which you can do. So you have an active-active replication between two HANA servers here, and you do an asynchronous sync. For example, if you do DR on Azure or somewhere on the public cloud, that would be a scenario where you basically have an active-active on-premise, but for disaster, you do asynchronous to the cloud and can just fire up your DR system on the cloud. We have developed together with SAP a cluster connector, which means even an SAP administrator who's not using Linux and is up on the operating system sees within the management console the status of the cluster. So it goes bi-directional. We can show you a screenshot at the pedestal how it looks like, but it's fully integrated, and you basically see the health of the HANA cluster right within the SAP management console. Then there is the support of the CSPs, the cloud service providers. We're missing Google here. We obviously also support Google. They're all slightly different because of the block devices and so on. But for example, there is a good documentation on Azure. If you Google for it, how to set it up, there's automation going on that's happening. And then we're coming to the HANA scale-out solution, where I'm basically building up one HANA cluster consisting of multiple HANA databases, and do a failover there.
Quick question for you.
Yeah.
On this last configuration here, which is usually what we see out there, usually your failover time from one node, primary node, to secondary node, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And I know you're going to tell me it depends. It depends on what. If you can just give me perspective on that.
So I think let's have the technical discussion with Bernd over there.
Okay.
Later on, because he's one of the HA experts, and we can go much deeper into this. And I'm not giving you a "it depends" answer, but you get a good one, right?
So, Christian, is it automated? This part, the cost-optimized solution?
It's
the QA down?
It's partly automated, I think.
Okay, so you have to manually take the QA down.
Yeah, you have to do some steps, but it's all well documented. So.
But it's not fully automated.
Not yet, but there is work going on to also support new HA scenarios that HANA is bringing to the table. Okay, good. So, talking about Optane, briefly, if you haven't heard about it, Optane has been announced publicly in April by Intel, and one of the big problems that you see in HANA is that it's in a memory database, which means as soon as you're losing power on your server, your data is gone, you have to do a full reload. And that just takes time if you're thinking about 3, 4, 5, 6 terabytes or even larger systems. So what Optane is doing, it's basically like a DRAM memory module that you put onto your server. I mean, it's more than just putting it on, you have to enable it and so on. So there's more work to do than just putting Optane on the in the server, but you basically, what you get out of it is persistent memory, which means even if the server loses power or you have to restart the server, your HANA memory resides in the Optane module, and that means after the restart, you just have to do a consistency check and your server is back way faster. So the whole reload and so on goes away, and we can also dive much deeper into it. At this point, there is a mix of DRAM and persistent memory that SAP requires, so it's only the column store that goes into the persistent memory. I did a webcast last week that you might want to check out on the SUSE.com site together with Fujitsu, which goes much deeper into it, how to enable the Optane, the non-volatile memory, and so on. What's kind of interesting is you see more memory being supported with Optane as well per CPU and per socket. So there is also a big change. At this point, there is a limit of 3 terabyte per CPU, but the desire is to go to 4. So there's a lot of movement happening there. And it's quite interesting, especially if you think about data center operation, because if your server is coming back faster, that means you're not exposed to risk for a longer time because you only run HANA with one cluster node, right? So I think that's why it's interesting to look into this from a SLES perspective. We support it since SLES 12 SP4, which means SP4, SP5, and SLES 15 GA and SLES 15 SP1. They all support Optane memory by now, so it's basically the latest incarnations, and we've worked very, very closely with SAP and Intel to come to this point and enable the technology in just the plain operating system. So there's a lot of work that went into that. Also a topic, if you're interested, that we can have a deeper discussion on. And then last but not least, you might have heard about SAP DataHub already as a solution to integrate SAP system, non-SAP system, unstructured data. So there will be a lot of talk, I guess, happening there. The interesting thing from a SUSE side is that SAP is shipping DataHub as, I think, one of the first solutions as containers. So there's the fundamental shift. I assume most of you have heard about Kubernetes, containers, Dockers, and so on. So there is a big shift. We've been working very, very closely with SAP in this area as well. Watch this space. There's probably something coming its way at some point in terms of an announcement. But at this point, SUSE has a solution called CASP, Container as a Service Platform, that we provide, and we're at this point certified already for DataHub deployments on-premise. If you want to go on-premise, there's also the option to deploy it on cloud. But just the whole notion of SAP starting to deliver solutions as a container is very interesting, and you will also see this happening for HANA, at least in their cloud. So there is a lot of work going on that we see in Walldorf happening, and just keep an eye on the container space. That's just a talk for 30 or 40 minutes by itself to dive into that. Okay, so I think if this moves at some point, it does. So the final slide, and then I'm out of here. So from a SUSE perspective, we can really support, independent of your decision how you run your how you run your SAP solution, different deployment models, right? So we can support you on the standard deployment with SLES for SAP, for NetWeaver, HANA, S4HANA deployments, for DataHub with container as a service, and if you build up your own cloud platform, there's the OpenStack Cloud and the enterprise storage that helps you building a cloud platform up for your data center and start to deploy SAP workloads. And with that, I think that brings me to the final chart. Russ disappeared. Are there any questions?
Oh yeah, you done? All right, let's give a.
You told me 20
All
minutes.
right, let's give Christian a big hand. Here, let's give Christian a big hand. And I'm filming you as the audience right now. All right. How'd they do? Were they a pretty good crowd?
They were a pretty good
All right,
crowd.
well, let's.